What's up, Sooner Nation? Welcome to the SI Sooners podcast. Man, we had reached hump day of this open date, Parker, and we have been grinding. Telling you guys, we had Zoom calls yesterday with Lincoln Riley in the offense. We had Zoom calls today with Alex Grinch in the defense. And then yesterday, Lon Kruger and the men's basketball team. Well, they started practice today, but they had the Zoom calls yesterday with those guys, Parker.
Yep, we're starting to get into two-sport season here, John. You know, football, it's kind of hard to think that football's winding down almost, but oddly enough, we're just about to the halfway point of the college football season, and you got basketball coming along in November, so it won't be long before we're juggling football and the hardwood action for you.
You take that back. Football season's not almost over. 4 games in, 6 games to go. Is that right? So, you're right. Almost to the halfway point. It's kind of a miracle that we've gotten this far. Baylor doesn't really count, I guess, because they just keep postponing. I think they're actually going to play in the spring. We shall see. I'm John Hoover. I'm in Tulsa. That's Parker Thune and Norman. Thanks for listening to the SI Sooners podcast. And thanks for watching the SI Sooners podcast on YouTube. Parker, I don't know. I feel like we should start breaking down the X's and O's of the TCU game. Don't you think? Okay, I'm kidding. What we're actually going to do, spend a little more time on the Texas game because there's an open date, and it was the Texas game. I mean, I got to ask the question, Parker, was it real? Was it a mirage? Was it like one of those, virtual reality headsets where you're totally immersed and yet it's completely fake? Because Texas, I mean, come on. Texas stinks. How much can Oklahoma take from that one game this year, Parker?
Well, I'll tell you what. On the one hand, John, you don't want to get too full of yourselves after a victory like that because, as you said, Texas is not a great football team. You've got a bye week coming up. Perfect opportunity to start cultivating a little bit of complacency heading into that road date with TCU and maybe get surprised on the other end. But at the same time, you also are coming off a victory against your most hated rival. And regardless of how good they are, that's the kind of emotional high that can sustain you for 4, 5, 6 games down the road. So it's not out of the question that Oklahoma builds some momentum off of this Texas victory and carries it over through the rest of October into November and starts to get on a roll here. It could go really either direction. And I think a lot of it comes down to how Oklahoma approaches this bye week and how they game plan for TCU and how seriously they take the Horned Frogs and Max Duggan coming off a loss to Kansas State.
Perfect time for an open date because there's a natural tendency when you hit that emotional high to kind of drop off a little bit. Stoops' team never really did that over the course of 20 years, 18 years. He avoided that for the most part. But, new coach, new way of doing things. You would think that maybe there's a little bit of a possibility of an emotional letdown if they come back 7 days later and play a game. So I think this is a good time for the open date. You get to kind of reset. You get to kind of come down off that high, and then you get to kind of refocus on what's important. And we talked to Alex Grinch today and just cultivating consistency, finding a way to become more consistent throughout the game. And certainly in the fourth quarter, you wrote about that today. I had asked him some questions about it. I think that's something that's, not just inherent on the defense. This offense, Parker, needs to figure out a little bit of consistency as well. One game they can't run the ball. The next game they have trouble in the fourth quarter throwing the football. The next game they come out and run the ball well, but the throwing is either hot or cold. Spencer Rattler can't pick a receiver in particular to go to. It looks like he might have started settling on some guys against Texas. The offensive line gives up some sacks, then they can't get any rushing yards, and then they come out the next quarter. At least in Texas, it was one quarter, then bad, then one quarter, then bad. Just dominate people and then just kind of have a series of errors or a series of unfortunate events that this team is so young and so inexperienced. We've said it 100 times. That Texas game may have done something for that. Don't you think that Texas game could have maybe steered them a little bit emotionally, focus-wise, at least in the right direction for the rest of the year?
Well, definitely. And I'll tell you what, on Tom Herman's Big 12 teleconference on Monday morning, he got slammed after he said, hey, my team's still trying to develop an identity. And I don't think the critiques that came Herman's way were fair at all, because I feel like with where we're at right now in the current state of college football, just about every team is still developing their identity because of the constantly shifting personnel. And you mentioned it, the Sooners need to settle into a rhythm on the offensive side of the football, and you can only do that to a certain extent when you have different guys available week in and week out. And you look at the guys that Spencer Rattler's been throwing the ball to. Obi Obialo has missed 3 of 4 games. Braden Willis has missed 3 of 4 games. Other guys here and there have missed a game. Seth McGowan obviously was out this past contest, which paved the way for TJ Pledger and Marcus Major to take over in the ground game. I tell you what, John, when you have this constantly revolving door on both offense and defense, it is really hard to figure out who you are as a football team. It's really hard for a quarterback to develop a rapport with his receivers. And I do think that this game against Texas gave Spencer Rattler an opportunity to start doing that. You start to see him develop some chemistry with Theo Weiss. You started seeing him develop some chemistry with Austin Stockner. Drake Stoops obviously made a couple of big plays, both in this game against Texas and the game against Kansas State a couple weeks back. So here's the thing, John. I think you're 4 games into the season now. In an ideal world, you're going to start to see less and less guys held out of action in the COVID-19 protocol. And so you're going to start to see the snowball roll downhill in terms of chemistry on both sides of the football. And one would hope, Sooner Nation would hope, that getting Chris Murray eligible, the transfer from UCLA is going to be a boost to that offensive line, which has had its struggles over the first 4 games of the season. But the bye week especially, it hitting where it did, and you mentioned it's kind of an ideal spot for that bye week to hit. But going into the bye week and coming out on the other side, heading to TCU, I think you're going to see the Sooners a lot closer knit than they have been the last few weeks, simply by virtue of the fact that they've gotten to the point where they realize what they're dealing with. You know, these guys realize what they're dealing with in terms of their peers, in terms of their teammates, the guys in their unit. They're going to start to develop a rapport, and that's not just limited to Spencer Rattler and the receivers. Think about the secondary has had some issues. The front 7 is just starting to gel, and we saw that against Texas. So when you're taking into account team chemistry, I think you did see some big steps in that direction against Texas. And I'm excited to see how the Sooners can make that carry over into the second half of Big 12 play, starting with that date against TCU.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned Tom Herman, because I did a radio hit this morning with Mike Steely on the Sports Animal Tulsa, and he asked me this question. He said, "You think Tom Herman makes it to 2021? What do you think, Parker?"
Ooh, that's tough, John. It really is tough, because the people down in Texas, the folks down in Austin, don't have a whole lot of patience for mediocrity. And that's really all that Texas has been, is mediocre under Tom Herman. You can say, oh, they won the Sugar Bowl. But the reality of the situation, John, is that with as well as Texas recruits every year, the people making the decisions, the people who cut the checks, aren't going to be too thrilled to see the Longhorns keep piling up 8-win season after 8-win season. No, the expectation after a decade of mediocrity is that Texas is going to be in the thick of the national championship discussion here before long. And is Tom Herman the guy that can take them there? I'm hesitant to believe it. I am, especially just given the fact that you've had stability at the quarterback position for the last 4 years with Sam Ehlinger, and the fact that you haven't been able to build something around that guy, around your guy, that's concerning to me. And so I'm not sure whether Tom Herman gets another year at Texas. I think he's definitely on the hot seat as of right now. And I think the other thing that people are obviously going to be upset about is the fact that he's 1-4 against Oklahoma. And so, yeah, that seat's getting a little warm under Tom Herman. And I'd say it's about a 50-50 shot right now. And we're really going to have to see how Texas responds to the loss to Oklahoma, because their season is at a crossroads as much as Oklahoma's is. They can spiral out of control, or they can hit the ground running and start to pile up some wins against these mediocre Big 12 opponents, as they should, if we're trying to put Texas in the conversation of, oh, that's a top 20, top 25 national program. So if that's the expectation for Texas, if the expectation is that they're going to be in the conversation for a New Year's Six Bowl every year, there's no reason why, especially here in 2020, they shouldn't win at least 6 or 7 more games.
Okay. So you mentioned 1-4. Here's another question for you. You think Sam Ehlinger comes back for a second senior season in 2021? I mean, earlier in the school year, the NCAA said that fall student athletes have no eligibility lost this year. So any senior who wants to come back next year can come back if their school will have them, presumably, right? Well, today the NCAA Division I Council said the same thing about winter sport athletes, basketball, wrestling. So what do you think, Parker? You think Ehlinger tries to come back next year? Maybe a better way of asking it would be, would he want to risk becoming the first quarterback in college football history probably to lose to his rival 5 times or maybe even 6 if they make the Big 12 championship game? It's a long shot, but who knows? What do you think? You think he's coming back next year?
Yeah, I do, John. And here's the reason why. You look at the NFL prospects for Sam Ehlinger right now, I think another season would do him a lot of good in terms of getting some good film for scouts. Because as of right now, no one's talking up Sam Ehlinger as a future franchise quarterback in the NFL. And given the fact that no players are losing eligibility here in 2020, if you don't know for a fact that you're going to be a first, second, third round draft pick, if you don't know for a fact that you're going to be taken in the high rounds come April, I don't know why you wouldn't come back for another season to try and put yourself in that position come 2022. And here's the thing about Ehlinger. He loves the University of Texas.
Oh, yeah.
He loves Texas. And so even if Herman gets run out of town, it would not shock me at all if Ehlinger came back for another season. In fact, I think I would be more surprised at this point if he didn't come back for another season.
Wants to play the final senior year for Urban Meyer. Just saying. So I mentioned it right there. We had a little breaking news today. The NCAA basically came out and said, hey, whatever you guys want to do, it's fine with us. They said, no eligibility loss for winter sport athletes this school year. That's cool. It's going to be kind of tough for the incoming freshmen, and it's going to be tough for those equivalency sports or those head count sports where the coach has to match scholarships with, scholarship limits. That's going to be tough if he's got extra players. He or she has extra players, I should say. They also said there's going to be a one-time transfer waiver for all student athletes in all sports. And that one still has to be voted on in January, but I think it'll pass. And then you know what else they said today? They said, you know what? We got 127 teams playing football in 2020, or there will be when all the conferences finally get rolling. So no minimums for bowl eligibility. Anybody who wants to go to a bowl and gets invited to a bowl can go to a bowl. Whee! Yeah, baby, party at Mark Emmert's house, right? That's what the NCAA is going right now. This is blowing my mind. This is like the movie Hall Pass, or maybe it's more like The Purge. Remember that, where the year 2020 is like that one year when you can break literally every rule, Parker, except the marijuana rule, apparently. Yeah, I say that. And then Justin Harrington was on Instagram this morning. Did you see this? Posted a little Instagram post, said, these boys are back for TCU. And he mentioned not only Ronnie Perkins, but Trajan Bridges, Ramondre Stevenson, and Seth McGowan. Now, don't get it twisted. McGowan had a concussion against Texas. Those other guys were suspended, as we thought. But, apparently they have served their suspensions, meaning with the season reduced to 10 games and they're already having served one game last year in the playoff, then the suspension for half the season has been reduced to half of this season, or 5 games, Parker. I think this is going to be a little bit different looking team with all those guys back on the field. Up next on the SI Sooners podcast, here's how OU wins its 6th straight Big 12 title. Hey, are you a business owner looking to get your product out there to the masses? Let's say you run a hotel in Norman, or a car dealership in Oklahoma City, or a restaurant in Edmond, or maybe you're a small online business who creates and sells OU merchandise, and you just want Sooner Nation to come sample your wares. Well, then consider advertising in this space right here on the SI Sooners podcast. SI Sooners reaches thousands of readers, viewers, and listeners literally every day, and the SI Sooners podcast is the ideal place to find your next customer. To advertise, send an email to allsoonersi@gmail.com or DM us on Twitter at @all_Sooners. Follow SI Sooners on Twitter at @all_Sooners. Find Parker at Parker Thune, Thune. I'm at John E. Hoover. Parker's also on Instagram at Parker Thune. I'm on Facebook, John Hoover Media, John E. Hoover Media, sorry. Our website is allsooners.com, and it's all free for now. Trust me on that when I say for now, so you better get in there. Jump in there and join the community section. It's just like a message board. You fire up. I want to see some messages from you guys. And of course, find the video version of this podcast over on my YouTube channel, John Hoover Media. Leave a comment there too, because there's a lot of fun. In fact, while you're there, you know what? Go ahead and subscribe. I post all kinds of press conferences. I post the videos, interviews, and more. If you subscribe and hit that little notifications bell, ding, you'll know when they get posted. Remember, if you are watching my original YouTube channel, it is eventually going away. I'm sorry, but it is. It's just going to happen. So I need you guys to subscribe to my other YouTube channel. It's not like some new media wild and wacky thing that you can't get like from outer space or something. It's on YouTube. It's just a different YouTube channel. It's right here, this little card. Just click. Parker and I will wait while you click on it and then hit subscribe. I promise we're not going anywhere. Okay, you're back. And all the stuff that I post here will be posted there first. So when this channel is El Muerto, that's the only one that I will be posting to. Don't know when that's going to be, but trust me, it's going to happen someday. Again, you don't have to do anything but subscribe to that other channel. That's when this one goes away. You're going to be good to go. Trust me. Okay, I got a couple questions on Parker on OU's chances to win the Big 12 again this year. Okay, that would be number 6 in a row. I think, number 14 overall? Is that right? Including all Bobs? That's just crazy. You say it can't happen this year because they have 2 losses, but I think it absolutely can happen. Number 1, it's like Alex Grinch said last week after the Texas game. You're never winning the game. You're never losing the game. You just keep playing hard until the clock reads zeros. I love that. But anyway, same thing for the season. Until you are mathematically eliminated, you're still in it. In Oklahoma's case, Parker, they're still in it because there's still 6 games left to play. They played 3 in conference. They've got 6 games left. There's only 2 teams that are actually ahead of them right now, using Alex Grinch's theory of nobody's ahead, nobody's behind. There's only 2 teams ahead of them. One's Kansas State, the other's Iowa State. Okay, so now obviously first up, OU has to run the table. They have to finish 7-2 in conference play. Then Oklahoma needs just one of those 2 teams, Kansas State or Iowa State, to lose twice. And in losing twice, OU needs them to lose to the right team, which means the idea here is you want to force a 3-way tie with someone that Oklahoma beats, but also that person also beats Iowa State, for instance. That way in the 3-way tie, they are all 1-1 against each other. They have to be 1-1. If you get in a 3-way tie with 2 losses and somebody is 2-0 in that little 3-way group, then that team that's 2-0 goes on. So you have to be 1-1 against each other. Does that make sense? Good. After all the tiebreakers have been exhausted now, when you're 1-1 against each other, everybody's got the same record. You're 6-1 against everybody else in this scenario. Then you start digging into point differential. I think that's the 3rd tiebreaker the Big 12 uses. Point differential. Now you're talking Oklahoma's game, because eventually I think these Sooners are going to start scoring a lot of points. They are going to start blowing some people out, you'd think. And that's when they can get back in this thing. Now consider that Kansas State lost its quarterback, Skylar Thompson, for the year. They also lost All-American kick returner Joshua Youngblood to the transfer portal in October, which is just, even now, it's weird to me. So, Parker, what are Oklahoma's chances to win yet another Big 12 title? I mean, the odds came out yesterday from Bovada, and Vegas still likes the Sooners.
Yeah, I tell you what. The thing about it is Oklahoma is going to need some help, and they already got some help with Joshua Youngblood transferring, Skylar Thompson out for the year. Kansas State is going to have a lot of work to do to stay afloat in the Big 12 at this point in time, and I don't doubt at all that Chris Kleeman can make that happen, but that's a tall task. That's a tall task for any coach, and I think Chris Kleeman is one of the best coaches in the entire country, not just the Big 12. So if there's anybody that can do it, he certainly can, but things don't look good for that Wildcats team right now. You didn't mention Oklahoma State, and here's the thing about the Cowboys, is that Oklahoma's going to need them to pick up a loss somewhere along the line too, because even if the Sooners beat Oklahoma State in Bedlam, that's still just 1 conference loss for the Pokes. Oklahoma's got 2. So at that point in time, the Cowboys are still ahead of Oklahoma. And my biggest question here, John, is how do COVID-19 cancellations impact the race for the Big 12 title? Because let's just say, for instance, what if Baylor wins out, Oklahoma's scheduled to play them the last week of the regular season. What if Baylor wins out and they only end up playing, say, 6 or 7 games, and then they have another COVID outbreak and they have to cancel their game with Oklahoma on December 5th? And then what happens if Baylor's only got 1 conference loss, Oklahoma's got 2, but Baylor had to be the one to cancel the game because they had a COVID outbreak? How do you think Oklahoma, how do you think Lincoln Riley, how do you think everybody involved with the Sooner program is going to feel if Baylor ends up going to the conference championship game in lieu of the Sooners and Oklahoma never got a shot to take them down? I think that's an angle that it doesn't seem like anybody is talking about at this point. But as it's become evident that we're going to see more cancellations, we just saw LSU and Florida go by the wayside. So there are going to be more games canceled. How does that impact the race for the conference championship? We'll have to see.
Nick Saban came down with the COVID today, him and his athletic director. So you're right. Remember now, just last weekend, Oklahoma State was coming off of a Sunday, an open date, and they said, oh, man, we can't wait to finish practice tonight, and now we're all ready for Baylor. And guess what? Baylor called them and said, yeah, we can't play this weekend. Let's move the game to December 12th. So they play the Sooners on the 5th, you said. They play Oklahoma State on the 12th. You're right. What happens if they default because of the Big 12 will go by winning percentage? What a hellacious strategy. You don't play the game, you go to the championship game. You do play the game, you risk losing to a red-hot Oklahoma team, possibly at that time of the year, and not going to the championship game. I would really hate college football if they started pulling shenanigans like that to get their teams to the championship game. That would be really dirty pool. Ooh, boy, you talk about, and what are we supposed to say? If they tell us they don't have enough players and they're not making the information public, what are we supposed to say? Are we supposed to say, oh, you're just sandbagging it? No, we don't know. So we have to take them at their word. And anybody that would do such a thing knows that we would have to take them at their word. Not a big fan. Not a big fan of that scenario, Parker. Okay, so for the purposes of this podcast, Parker, we've got OU in the Big 12 championship game. But who are they going to play? And I'm saying it right here. It's going to be Iowa State or it's going to be Oklahoma State, as you mentioned earlier. One of those two teams. Sorry, Alex Grinch, but they actually both are ahead of you right now because neither one of them has a loss. But, what do you think? Cyclones or Cowboys?
Well, if I had to pick right now, John, I would lean towards Iowa State just because I think that football team looks more well-rounded than the Pokes. But hey, like I said last week, they keep Shane Illingworth at the quarterback position. I think there's definite potential that the Cowboys could make a run. And I don't think that's going to happen. This is why I say Iowa State. I think Mike Gundy's going to go back to Spencer Sanders and kind of shoot himself in the foot. But no, the way Matt Campbell coaches that team and as fundamentally sound as they are and as resilient as they proved that they are in that victory over Oklahoma in Ames, I'm confident that Iowa State will very much be in the thick of things for the Big 12 title at season's end. Even if they don't end up making the championship game, they'll be right there. And they got some players, John. Oklahoma found that out the hard way. It's not just Brock Purdy. It's Breece Hall. It's Charlie Kohler. It's Greg Eisworth. All around the field, Iowa State's got playmakers.
Mike Gundy has had a time or two where he's picked the wrong quarterback. It's just, I'm just saying. It's happened before. You could be onto something. Up next on the SI Sooners podcast, it's your segment. It's the Mailbag.
Hey there, loyal listeners. Parker Thune here with SI Sooners. Are you a business owner looking to get your product out there to the masses? Let's say you run a hotel in Norman, or a car dealership in Oklahoma City, or a restaurant in Edmond. Or maybe you're just a small online business who creates and sells OU merchandise, and you want Sooner Nation to come sample your wares. Consider advertising in this space right here on the SI Sooners podcast. SI Sooners reaches thousands of readers, viewers, and listeners literally every day, and the SI Sooners podcast is the ideal place to find your next customer. To advertise, send an email to allsoonersi@gmail.com or send us a direct message on Twitter at @all_Sooners.
Final segment of the SI Sooners podcast. It is Wednesday, so that means it is time for the mailbag. It's my favorite segment of the week. I got a lot of favorite segments, but I think this is number one. How about that? Parker, I'm going to take it all the way back to last Saturday when I got like back-to-back-to-back tweets from Scott Fogelman and Will Corporon. Scott asks, is it safe to recognize how completely awful Lincoln is as a fourth quarter coach? And Will asks, is it time for Lincoln to hire an OC? Wonder where I've heard that before. He says he's making some mistakes, in my opinion. And then later in the week, Corey Wyatt asked the same question. Should he give up some OC duties? What are your thoughts?
John, I could legitimately go either way. I'm not comfortable answering this question definitively until we see how the rest of this season plays out, because I don't want to be hitting the panic button after those two losses to start the season for Oklahoma. But at the same time, I think you look at the way that Lincoln Riley's play calling has been over the past few weeks and how it's burned the Sooners in those losses and how it almost burned them Saturday against Texas. You can certainly make that argument. And like I said, the thing about it is if Oklahoma rebounds, if they win out in the Big 12, win the Big 12 title, go to a New Year's Six bowl game, then I don't think anyone is engaging this conversation. I think there is a certain element of overreaction, and I don't think it's an entirely unhealthy overreaction, but an overreaction nonetheless. At this point in time, I think Lincoln Riley's doing a fine job. I don't think the poor play calling in the late stages has become enough of a trend yet for any Sooner fan to be hitting the panic button. I say give it some time. Let's see how the season plays out. If we start to see this crop up 5-6 games down the road and it becomes a trend throughout the entire season and not just the first couple of games of Big 12 play, then you can start entertaining that discussion.
Fair enough. And it's not like he's going to hire an offensive coordinator in the bye week, right? So come on.
That is right. All right. Your question is from Danny McCoy. Grimes for OU, number 14, referring to Reggie Grimes. Saw him a lot in the first game against Missouri State, which is true. Haven't noticed him playing since. Is he active on the depth chart each week?
As far as I know, he's healthy. I've been watching him go through warm-ups and everything. He's certainly active, so to speak. This isn't the NFL where they activate or deactivate players for practice squad or designate any of that. He's been dressed out every game. He's on the two deep. He's ready to go if they need him. Again, I've seen him in warm-ups. He's right there with the ones and the twos. I think you saw him that first week because as a freshman, he got to play in a 48-0 blowout. He hasn't played much these last 3 games because as a freshman, the games have been really close and the other guys have been playing well, especially at that position, Isaiah Thomas. Okay, Parker, at Okie Made on Twitter asks, is Oklahoma still being listed as a favorite to win the Big 12? Per Bovada, they're plus 145. They're plus Iowa State's plus 325 and Oklahoma State is plus 350. Is that any indication of how bad the Big 12 is this year?
Yes. Yes, to a certain extent it is, because the Big 12 is bad. And you think about it, the guy that is third in the Big 12 right now in touchdown passes, Alan Bowman, just got benched at Texas Tech. So really every program in the Big 12 right now is experiencing some turnover and some inner tumult. I mean, Oklahoma State, the one team that's undefeated in the Big 12, is rolling with the guy that was their third string quarterback to open the year. So everybody is in uncharted waters at this time. I think it makes sense that Oklahoma is still the favorite simply because they've been there before. 5-time reigning Big 12 champions. So if there's a year where there's as much chaos as there is here in 2020, you stick with the team that has proven themselves and has proven that they can deal with adversity. And I think Oklahoma and Lincoln Riley at the helm, they've proven that they can do that. And so it is, to a certain extent, an indictment on the Big 12, but I think it's also a vote of confidence that Oklahoma is going to be able to right the ship. And in this season that has brought so much turmoil, the Sooners are the most trustworthy team in the conference. All right, Bobby McKay, John, asks, is it fair to compare the OT win versus Texas and the OT win in Tennessee with Baker going back to 2015? It was Baker's second game, Rattler's fourth. It was clearly Baker's team after that win. This is now Rattler's team. Did he grow up on Saturday like Baker did in Tennessee?
Bobby asked a lot of good questions to the Ask Hoover blog and the show, the radio show that we used to have. So we appreciate that, Bobby. It's a great comparison. Solid. A couple of differences. Baker fell behind early in that game and was playing catch up the whole game. Obviously, he was just kind of freewheeling at some point. Rattler, on the other hand, against Texas, was ahead early and was trying to hold on to the lead before he got benched and before he got pulled. I remember thinking, after Baylor threw his second interception at Neyland Stadium, man, that stadium gets rocking, by the way. That was some atmosphere. But I remember thinking after that second pick, well, I guess Baker isn't the man. I guess we can expect to see Trevor Knight at some point, if not tonight, and then some point this season. I guess the quarterback competition is open back up. You thought the same thing. You know you did. Anyway, I doubt that Lincoln Riley ever really considered Trevor in Knoxville. But he did move on to Mordecai in Dallas, and I thought that was interesting. And then the other big difference, and we all know this, Baker had played more than half a season at Texas Tech as a true freshman. Then he transferred. Then he played freaking intramural ball. Then he sat out and he redshirted and he won the job. In my opinion, he actually won the job that first spring when he wasn't even eligible yet. Remember that? It comes out spring game, goes 11 for 11. Anyway, all that is to say, I think Rattler still got to go through some things before he can call this his team. He did play great in the overtime against Texas, but I think he's still got some maturing to do. I mean, it is kind of his team, sort of, but since he's still just a freshman, he's on the young side. To say it's his team, I think it's still a little bit early. Okay, Parker, Andy C. Wright on Twitter asks, Anton Harrison earned the full-time starter role at left tackle, no?
Yes, it seems as though he has, and I'm not surprised by that, really. The Sooners had problems at that tackle position with Eric Swenson last year, and so Anton Harrison coming in clearly impressed some people in preseason camp, and he's most definitely a guy that has all the physical tools to play that position. You look at him, he's huge, he can move, and so he projects as kind of the anchor of that line for the next few years. If you're thinking about what Creed Humphrey has been to the Oklahoma line in the last few years, that's more than likely going to be Anton Harrison, just getting that starting gig as early as he did. And hey, there were higher touted guys than Anton Harrison in this class. You look at Nate Anderson, you look at Andrew Rame. Neither of those guys did what Anton Harrison did and rose to the challenge and assumed a starting job. So props to him, and it's clearly a huge testament to how highly the coaching staff thinks of him and how ready he was for the collegiate game. So definitely I think the coaching staff has to be very pleased with Anton Harrison and the way that he has developed in such a short time and in such a strange offseason to be coming in as a true freshman in particular. All right, John. Harry Taylor, hype man Harry, appreciate you, brother. He asks, when is the last time my Sooners blocked a punt and a field goal in the same game before Saturday? That's an interesting one.
Yeah, interesting. A little bit of history here. Harry, our man Mike Brooks, who is my, of course, go-to guy when it comes to OU history. And I answered this question on Twitter for you earlier in the week, but I thought our podcast folks would like to know this as well. The last time OU blocked a punt and a field goal in the same game before Saturday against Texas, love this, was against Indiana State in 1999. That's right, Bob Stoops' first game. I can remember that. Them blocking a punt and I remember block kicks anyway. And I remember thinking on that day, listening to the game on the radio, well, I'm pretty sure John Blake's team's got field goals and punts blocked against them a lot, but I guess this Stoops guy seems to have it together. He seems like a little bit different coach. Parker, Jason Moore asks, where have all the explosive plays gone? Is it personnel? Is it play calling? Is it design? Is it execution?
Well, on a certain level, John, I think it's personnel. The Sooners don't have a home run threat, the kind of guy that CeeDee Lamb was, and they don't have a running back in that backfield right now, the caliber of Trey Sermon or Kennedy Brooks. And No, that's not a dig at any of the guys on the roster. The reality of the situation is, hey, CeeDee Lamb is tearing it up in the NFL right now. He's clearly a guy that was a next-level talent. And Kennedy Brooks and Trey Sermon both average upwards of 5 yards a carry. Brooks averaged like 8 yards a carry, John. Just an absolutely ridiculous talent at the running back position, and I'm sure that the Sooners are hurting a little bit to have him around after he opted out back in August. But I think you look at this roster top to bottom, there are playmakers. There is no CeeDee Lamb, and there is no Kennedy Brooks. And that's just the type of thing that the Sooners are going to have to learn to deal with. You're not going to see the ridiculous 65, 70-yard touchdown catches that you saw from CeeDee Lamb. You're not going to see the long breakaway runs that you saw from Kennedy Brooks and Ramondre Stevenson to a certain extent. We forget we haven't seen him on the field. So Oklahoma's offense right now isn't necessarily set up personnel-wise in a manner that's conducive to those explosive big plays. Chunk gains? Sure. And I think we've seen a lot of those from Oklahoma over the first 4 games. But if you're expecting those kinds of plays, it's probably not going to be that kind of year for Oklahoma, simply because they don't have those guys. They don't have Brooks. They don't have Lamb. And hey, you saw a couple big plays in the opener from Charleston Rambo and Marvin Mims, and those are 2 guys that I think as they come into their own, you're going to see a lot more of those plays from them. But right now, I'd say let's pump the brakes a little bit. It's a little early to be placing those expectations on guys that are filling the void for one guy that is already excelling at the professional level in CeeDee Lamb, and another guy that will no doubt excel at the professional level in Kennedy Brooks.
Easy peasy, just like that. If you want to get in on the mailbag, it is easy. Just get in, get on Twitter and hit me up at John E. Hoover, or send it to Parker at Parker Thune. We will get you on the next podcast. And that next podcast is Sunday. Yes, it's an open date, but Parker and I are working. So y'all enjoy the games. Okay, have a great weekend. Listen to the SI Sooners podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Google, or wherever you get your podcasts, or on your Amazon-enabled device. Just say, Alexa, play the SI Sooners podcast and enjoy. Or go to allsooners.com, click on the player, and listen on your phone, your tablet, your computer, and watch the video on my YouTube channel. Simple as that. John Hoover Media. For Parker Thune, I'm John Hoover. See you guys.